Welcome to Old Rare Files. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe, become a member, and like our content.
A Japanese-American family standing in front of their home. The word Jap is painted on the walls. This photograph was taken after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Japanese Americans who had lived in the United States for generations suddenly faced suspicion, vandalism, and forced relocation. This family did nothing wrong. Their home was vandalized because of where their ancestors were born. Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin in the same photograph. Two men who together shaped the course of an entire century. At the time this was taken, one was already in power and the other was waiting. History rarely announces itself in advance, but looking at this image now, knowing what came next, it is almost impossible not to feel the weight of it. This photo was taken on a beach. A woman walking alone, dressed for a tropical vacation, carrying a bag. The scene looks ordinary, but look at the year. Coastal tourism like this was still considered a luxury for most people. The casual confidence in this image was something entirely new for the era it was taken in. Stop. This crowd is trying to keep moving while the world falls apart around them. This is how the Berlin Wall began. Not with crowds or ceremony, but with workers sealing streets and laying the first barriers almost overnight. Families who had been separated by a few blocks suddenly found themselves in different countries. There was no warning and no time to prepare. People woke up one morning and the city they knew was gone. The Berlin Wall is coming down. Water is being sprayed. The crowd is celebrating. Sections of concrete are being torn apart. November 1989. A wall that divided a city, a country, and in many ways an entire world, for 28 years. The people in this photograph lived their whole lives on one side of it. On this night, the wall stopped meaning anything, and they destroyed it with their hands. Workers balanced on narrow steel beams hundreds of feet in the air. No safety harness. No net, nothing between them and the ground below. Early 20th century construction. These men built the skylines that cities are famous for. They are not celebrated. Most of their names are not recorded anywhere. They went up every morning and they came back down every evening, if they were lucky. Goldfield, Nevada. 20. A boxing match with thousands of people surrounding the ring. The fight went 42 rounds. In the early era of the sport, there were no round limits the way there are today. You fought until someone could not continue. 42 rounds means this match lasted an extraordinary amount of time. Every person in this photograph watched every moment of it. Look carefully at this crowd. Somewhere in the middle of it is Abraham Lincoln. This is one of the rarest photographs ever taken of the 16th President of the United States, captured in a public setting among ordinary people. He is not on a stage. He is not posing. He is standing in a crowd, exactly like everyone around him. A man wearing a mechanical exoskeleton suit, looking at his reflection in a mirror. The device is attached to his limbs and torso. This is an early experiment in powered human augmentation, an attempt to enhance physical capability beyond what a human body can do alone. The technology that started here eventually became military exoskeletons, medical rehabilitation devices, and industrial strength suits. He's looking in the mirror at the beginning of all of that. Thousands of people surrounding a large aircraft at its public unveiling. This is the Boeing 727 prototype in the 1960s. Three rear-mounted engines, a new design for mid-range commercial flight. The people in this crowd are looking at the plane that would carry more passengers more miles than almost any other aircraft of its generation. At this moment, it is just a new thing that nobody has seen before. Inside an enormous hangar, the metal framework of an airship is being assembled. This is the USS Akron in the 1930s, one of the largest flying machines ever built. At its peak, rigid airships were considered the future of long-distance travel. Comfortable cabins, transatlantic crossings, the size of ocean liners. But in the sky, the future they imagined never arrived. But for a few years, it looked exactly like this. A security sign from World War II that reads, "What you see, do and hear here. When you leave here, let it stay here." These signs were posted everywhere that sensitive work was happening. Factories, military sites, research facilities. The government understood something that is still true. The biggest security risk is not technology. It is the person who talks too much. A man carrying a woman in a wicker chair strapped to his back. Early 20th century, colonial region. This was a common method of transportation in certain parts of the world where roads did not exist and terrain was difficult. The person being carried hired the person doing the carrying. The transaction was considered ordinary. Looking at it now, it is impossible not to see the imbalance in that arrangement. A group of women in matching uniforms with the maple leaf and the word Canada. Early 20th century athletes or sports team members. Women's competitive sports were not taken seriously at this time. These women competed anyway. They trained anyway. They wore their country's name anyway. The recognition they deserved mostly came later, long after the photographs were taken. A group of women at a harbor, manually rolling heavy barrels. Early 20th century. These are not men. These are women doing industrial dock labor, physical work that was considered exclusively male territory. They are here because the men were away at war, and the harbor did not stop needing workers. They showed up and they did the job. A young person climbing down through a passage carved entirely out of snow. Arctic region, survival conditions. This was not an adventure trip. This was how some people entered their homes in winter. Technique of carving shelters and tunnels into snow is thousands of years old, and it works better than most modern alternatives in extreme cold. A couple is kissing while a man in the background watches very carefully and takes notes. This was a scientific study. Researchers in the 20th century conducted experiments on human emotional behavior, including physical affection, observing and documenting how people respond to intimacy. The couple agreed to be studied. The scientist agreed to watch. Nobody thought this was strange. An enormous telescope inside an early 20th century observatory, the kind of instrument that required an entire building to house it. Before satellites, before digital imaging, before any of the tools astronomers use today, this is how humanity looked at the stars. Someone sat at the end of that telescope for hours, night after night, and wrote down everything they saw. Sailors gathered in a circle on the deck of a ship, watching a boxing match on a makeshift ring made of ropes. Long voyages meant weeks with very little to do. Boxing was training, entertainment, and competition all at once. The sailors watching this fight have nowhere else to be. They are completely focused on what is happening in that ring. This figurine is thousands of years old. The large eyes, the stylized form, the unusual proportions. Archaeologists are still debating exactly what it represented to the people who made it. A deity, a spirit, a protective object. Whatever it was, someone spent a significant amount of time making it look exactly like this. That choice was not accidental. A group of young people in a circle, holding hands outdoors. 1960s or 1970s. This image comes from the counterculture movement, when a significant portion of young people in America and Europe decided that the world their parents built was not the world they wanted to live in. They held hands in fields. They rejected most of what came before. History remembers some of what they built and forgot most of the rest. A child interacting with a large Humpty Dumpty figure in a natural outdoor setting. Early staged photography took nursery rhymes and children's stories and made them physical, life-sized, real enough to touch. For a child in the early 20th century, encountering something like this was not just entertainment. It was genuinely extraordinary. This is Charlie Chaplin before anyone knew who Charlie Chaplin was. A young man on a residential street, dressed simply, standing in front of ordinary houses. The style and presence are already there. The global fame is not yet. This photograph exists from a moment when the greatest comedian of the silent film era was still just a person on a street. Aerial view of Burbank, California in the late 1950s. Wide roads cutting through expanding neighborhoods, industrial zones pushing outward, everything growing at once. This is what the post-war economic boom looked like from above. Thousands of families moving into thousands of new houses in cities that were building themselves faster than anyone had seen before. American Gothic. Painted by Grant Wood in 1930. A man with a pitchfork and a woman standing in front of a house with a pointed Gothic window. It became one of the most parodied, referenced, and reproduced images in American cultural history. Wood said he was painting the kind of people he imagined would live in a house like that. The people he used as models were his dentist and his sister. Neither of them was particularly pleased about it. A basketball player in midair above the rim, about to dunk in front of a packed crowd. Mid-20th century. At this point in basketball history, a dunk was still rare enough to stop the room. The crowd is reacting to something they have not seen many times before. The athlete in this photograph knew that. He is performing for them, and he is delivering. Two men in a photography studio posing with a human skeleton they have dressed in clothes and a hat. Late 19th or early 20th century. This was not considered disturbing. It was considered funny. Dark humor has always existed. This photograph is proof that it existed in the Victorian era with exactly the same energy it has today. A group of children outside a movie theater, likely in the United Kingdom in the mid-20th century. The posters are advertising films. The kids are pressing close, excited. Some of them looking at the camera. For most of these children, the cinema was the most extraordinary thing available to them on a Saturday afternoon. And it was enough. This is Robert Plant, lead singer of Led Zeppelin, one of the most powerful rock bands ever assembled. And he is just walking down a street with a young girl, somewhere in the 1970s. No stage, no crowd, no performance. Just a man at the height of global fame in a quiet moment nobody was supposed to see. This is Bob Dylan. The photograph is in color, which immediately makes it feel different from most images of him. Simple clothes, a quiet gaze. He built a career on saying things in ways that had never been said before. This image captures the same quality. He's just standing there and somehow you feel like he's thinking something important. Everyone knows Marilyn Monroe, but this photograph shows something most people never think about. On the left is an ordinary young woman. On the right, after makeup, lighting, and styling, she becomes one of the most iconic faces of the 20th century. The transformation is not magic. It is craft. And this image proves it better than any words could. A soldier is coming home. His family is waiting with flags and a sign. This scene happened thousands of times across the 20th century. But it never stopped meaning everything to the people holding those signs. Behind every welcome home banner, there are years of waiting and not knowing. This family got their answer. A man feeding a child in a public setting while other children watch. Early 20th century. The simplicity of the scene makes it easy to overlook. But this is what most of human history looks like. Not battles, not monuments, not revolutions. Just one person taking care of another. The children watching in the background are just children waiting for their turn. Two men who look almost identical sitting together in a photography studio in the late 19th century. Possibly brothers, possibly twins. Before digital photography, before smartphones, before any of it, sitting for a portrait like this was an event. You dressed up. You traveled to the studio. You sat very still. And you left with proof that you existed. A control room filled with analog gauges and manual switches, likely in an electrical substation in the United Kingdom in the mid-20th century. Every single reading on every single dial had to be checked by a person. There was no automation. If something went wrong, someone in this room had to notice it first. These technicians were the system. A group of engineers and businessmen standing next to one of the earliest automobiles ever built. Early 20th century. These men knew they were looking at the future. They had no idea how completely it would change everything. Not just transportation, but cities, families, wars, economies, the air itself. They are smiling. They think they are standing next to a machine. They are standing next to the modern world. A couple posing next to a car with a "Just Married" sign. The celebration is obvious. The happiness is real. Weddings have always been a reason to stop everything and mark the moment. Different decade, different clothes, different car. Same feeling. Some things do not change no matter what century you are in. A boy on a bicycle in a narrow alley somewhere in an American city in the early 20th century. Brick walls on both sides. No adults in sight. Children in that era had a freedom of movement that is hard to imagine today. This boy is going somewhere. Nobody is worried about where. The River Thames, early 20th century London. Loaded barges moving slowly through the water with Tower Bridge rising behind them. This was not just a view. This was the engine of an empire. Every barge on this river was carrying goods that connected London to the rest of the world. The bridge was less than 20 years old when this was taken. Jerusalem, early 20th century. Inside a historic church, light is coming through tall windows and falling on hanging religious objects. The room is quiet in the photograph. It has been quiet for centuries. Places like this carry something that is very difficult to describe. You either feel it or you do not. Most people who have stood in this room have felt it. Two young women sharing an umbrella on a busy street, possibly in Japan in the mid-20th century. They are walking and talking and completely unaware of the camera. The city is moving around them. This is just a Tuesday. And somehow that makes it one of the most beautiful photographs in this entire collection. A horse-drawn carriage moving along a tree-lined street in England in the late 19th century. This was not unusual. This was just how people traveled. The automobile had not yet arrived to replace everything. This street, this carriage, these people, they had no idea what was coming. Within 2 decades, this way of life would be almost completely gone. 3 women in swimsuits posing in front of a decorative structure, somewhere in the United States in the 1930s or 1940s. Their confidence is striking. These are not professional models. These are ordinary women posing the way women in magazines posed, in a time when that kind of confidence in public was still considered bold. This group of people is looking at the Eiffel Tower. Their silhouettes are dark against the light. The tower rises behind them. It was built as a temporary structure in 1889, meant to be taken down after 20 years. The people who wanted it demolished, lost. The people standing in this photograph, looking up at it, 1D.